Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am Katie Hodemacki from Midtown Reader, an independent bookstore here in Tallahassee, and we are thrilled to be here tonight with author Susan Cerulean talking about her new memoir, I Have Been Assigned the Single Bird, out from University of Georgia Press. Before I introduce Susan and our guest moderator, Diane Roberts, who is joining us via audio tonight, I wanted to let you know that we'll allow a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience, and you can submit a question for Susan at any time during the event using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll choose as many of those as we have time for her to speak to at the end. I also wanted to mention that you can purchase I Have Been Assigned the Single Bird from Midtown Reader online at midtownreader.com by calling the store at 850-425-2665 or by stopping by. We offer in-store browsing Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and also private browsing appointments on Monday afternoons, which are a cool opportunity to have a bookstore all to yourself and your own personal bookseller to make recommendations. We offer contactless pickup and $5 delivery anywhere in Tallahassee, and of course we'll ship anywhere outside of Tallahassee. So we have 101 ways to get your books to you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce tonight's author. Susan Cerulean is a writer, naturalist, and activist based here in Tallahassee, Florida. Her nature memoir, Tracking Desire, A Journey After Swallow-Tailed Kites, was named an Editor's Choice title by Audubon magazine. Her many other books include Unspoiled, Writers Speak for Florida's Coast, co-edited with Janice Ray and A. James Woolpart, and Between Two Rivers, Stories from the Red Hills to the Gulf, co-edited with Janice Ray and Laura Newton. She's a founding member and former director of the Red Hills Writers Project and was named Environmental Educator of the Year by the Governor's Council for a Sustainable Florida. Tonight, Susan is here to discuss her new memoir, I Have Been Assigned the Single Bird, which trains a naturalist's eye and a daughter's heart on the lingering death of a beloved parent from dementia. At the same time, the book explores an activist's lifelong search to be of service to the embattled natural world. During the years she cared for her father, Susan also volunteered as a steward of wild shorebirds along the Florida coast. Her territory was a tiny island just south of the Apalachicola Bridge, where she located and protected nesting shorebirds, including least terns and American oyster catchers. I Have Been Assigned the Single Bird weaves together intimate facets of adult caregiving and the consolation of nature, detailing Susan's experiences of tending to both. She reminds us of the loving, necessary toil of tending to one place, one bird, one being at a time. Author Terry Tempest Williams calls the book an elegant memoir of devotion and imagination, inviting us with graceful determination to extend our compassion and sense of family to all species on this beautiful, broken planet we call home. This book is an awakening. So thank you for being with us tonight, Susan. Welcome.
My pleasure, so much my pleasure.
Here to be in conversation with Susan, joining us via audio, is Diane Roberts, who of course needs no introduction. She's a prolific writer and commentator, author of several books, including Dream State and Tribal, College Football and the Secret Heart of America, and a contributor to NPR, The Guardian, Oxford American, among many other publications. She's written about everything from Faulkner to football to Florida and its changing natural landscape. She teaches literature and creative writing at FSU. So thank you to Diane for being here as well. Diane, are you with us?
I am with you. Hello.
I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you because I know you have some questions for Susan.
Yes, indeed. And what I should say first off is I'm sorry that I am just a disembodied voice. For whatever reason, we're getting these mysterious messages that my camera doesn't like whatever we're doing. So I am sitting here looking at Susan and Katie, and alas, can't see anything. I mean, you can't see me. You're not missing anything, believe me.
That's not true.
I am so thrilled to be here, though, with this wonderful, wonderful book. This isn't just a really good book. This is an important book, and I think when Susan gets to talking, you'll start to understand why this book. It is a memoir, but it is also it's about how the past 3 generations have brought about some of the disasters we are experiencing now in ecological terms, and what we might be able to do about it. But it is written in the most exquisite prose, the most beautiful story of family and love, of people and of animals and of nature itself. And Susan has crafted this just the most elegant of metaphors that she uses to convey the story of how she took care of her father in his later years and how she sees that as part of a project of taking care of the planet, how we all have to take care of people, of things, of the world we live in. So the first question I wanted to throw at Susan, which I think is a really good one, given this splendid title, is tell us about the title. Why the single bird?
Well, the title just came intuitively to me when I was working in my journal somewhere in the process. And that's often true for me for chapter titles for sure, but this book title was a surprise. So then I knew that I had to trust that and kind of wrap the story around it. And it was clear really what the title was pointing to, which was the frustration of having this big ambition to save the birds or save Florida or save my father. And some people actually do save things. People who recovered endangered species or protect large swaths of the landscape from development or perform heart surgery. But from this, I never really have saved anything. So I'm seeing it more, I saw it more as an assignment to, I learned my way into this assignment to be with my dad through his process, as so many families do, and to, and then at the same time, use my time with the birds as a break and as a parallel work. So I was working, because we've lost so many birds, there are more and more low numbers, single birds. And then I just had this one dad who was a great, wonderful person to take care of most of the time.
Yes, that's a great way to put it, because you intertwine those elements in the book so beautifully. I shouldn't even say intertwine, because that makes it sound kind of messy, like vines, but it's very wonderfully integrated, both your concern for the natural world and your concern for the human in the person of, well, your father and your whole family, because as you write about dementia, that concerns the whole family. That is something, I mean, the robbing of memory, which I think is integral to your project in this book, because planetary destruction is a kind of robbing of memory, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And, you know, I know that many people I know, many of my friends really love the birds around their houses. And most people live in the suburbs or the city. And so the birds that they encounter are often feeder birds, or they're the Carolina wren making a nest on their front porch, or the cardinals, you know, the things that we all see. But in the meantime, way out there on the edges and in the deep forests, there are millions of species, and we've lost millions of species in the last 50 years, not just of birds, but I mean, we all know that we're in an extinction crisis. I think we all know that. And so, yeah, it's memory, because first of all, we don't have a chance to get to know them if we don't already, because they're gone. And secondly, as I learned with the swallowtail kites, there's a way that they weave the world together in their flight patterns, in what they eat, the roles that they play in the Earth ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if y'all don't know this, Susan's written a wonderful book about swallowtailed kite as well, which I highly recommend. I wonder, Susan, do you want to read a bit?
You want me to?
Sure, I do.
Okay.
And I can't hear everybody else, so I'll just assume that what I want is what everyone wants.
I do. I would like to hear you read.
We always assume that with you, Diane, because
Yes, there you go.
okay. So I'll just read for a few minutes. One afternoon during the 2nd September of my father's stay in Tallahassee in the nursing home, I stood near his bed and pressed my forehead against the window. And of course, in September, it's still like August in Tallahassee, so I didn't have the windows open, but I could hear the muffled calls of cardinals and red-eyed vireos. And I knew that the air outside was steaming like a thick, hot pudding, just like it is right now. When we first moved Dad into that room, the emerald light filtering through the windows reminded me of swimming underwater in a warm river. It wasn't really so bad like you might fear kudzu-mediated sunlight could be. But as time passed, I began to notice that many of the tall pines around the nursing home were dying under the weight of the vines swarming their living canopies. I saw that those smothering vines were like the tangles and the plaques in my father's brain, how both kudzu and Alzheimer's replace a vibrant living place, a brain once full of inborn competence and memories, dissolve those things in super slow motion, replacing them with loss. Dad's drugs, the Namenda and the Aricept, were like winter frost in the forest. For a time, they would keep and did keep the plaques in his brain at bay. But link by link, the invasive vines weighted that scaffold of mature trees with blankets of biomass. I could still make out the biggest magnolia setting its red fall fruit, but I didn't know if it would survive until freezing December nights slashed the kudzu back to its knees. Caring for my father was the right thing to do. I suppose that I thought with enough resources and kindness, I could raise him up from Alzheimer's as I had raised my son from a baby to a man, but this was a dementia of my own, to think that I could change the course of that disease. During the time we cared for my father, I volunteered as a steward of wild shorebirds along the North Florida coast. 2 or 3 times a month, between March and August, I'd slide my kayak down the concrete ramp at 10-foot hole in Apalachicola under the bridge and paddle to my territory, which was a teardrop of sand just south, where I was to locate and keep track of any nesting birds. One lucky day, I found a single oyster catcher brooding her eggs on the sand. Over her long orange dagger of a bill, through her scarlet-rimmed eyes, she had been tracking my approach long before I saw her. She saw my paddle slicing the quiet waters of the boat ramp, watched my path unfolding, even before I myself had ascertained the mood of the wind. Never should I think that my eyes are brighter and more alert than hers, she who has sifted into this landscape every day of her life and every day of the lives of her kind for millions of years. From that ancient perspective, she watched me from her nest scrape on the sand, 3 eggs burning into her brood patch, and she was ready to spring off the nest, even exposing her eggs to the sun in order to draw my eye from the shingle of beach that was home. Her job was to watch for danger, and our human selves are a grave danger to everything wild and vulnerable on the planet. The earth is the brain and the body into which we were born. In some nearly parallel way, we face not only a crisis in numbers of people diagnosed with dementia. As a culture, we are stricken with this disease and its attending violence. For why else would we knowingly destroy the planet that sustains our very lives? Our economic and political systems and all the ways we personally consume and give over our power to corporations and oligarchs, those are the illnesses that are killing our planet. When you have the physical disease, like my dad did, you experience it alone. But this dementia is cultural. So my question was, what is our part? What can each one of us do to alter the trajectory we ride? How can we bring healing to the world? So I'll stop there.
It's a beautiful reading and a good question. So what do we do? It's so overwhelming in a way. We think climate change and, you know, it's a global problem, but then we look out the window and we see clear cutting, or we know that the springs that are down the road from us are now polluted with nutrients, or we read about the 3 toll roads that the state of Florida thinks it wants to build through the last panther habitat and through some of our most pristine wilderness. It can be overwhelming. So how do we figure this out? How do we motivate ourselves to take the action that we can?
You know, for me, I think that we have to start by like digging down to the root of what's going on. And so thinking about, okay, there's the dementia that affects the brains and bodies of 6 million people, all the different kinds. They're not the results of natural aging, but are specific and identifiable. There's another dementia, the fact that we pretend we can solve the climate and extinction crises without treating them as crises, without even hardly thinking about it. We get inured to it. So I was driving down Blairstone Road in Tallahassee yesterday. I was going to vote, and I saw this new sign near the intersection of Blairstone and Magnolia, and it said, coming soon, self-storage. So what that means in Tallahassee is that all the trees in that spot are going to go down. And so to me, like, that's demented. That's crazy. We have so many places that are abandoned right now. And so, but there's something metaphorical about it too that makes you really think, like, self-storage. I'm going to have so much stuff that I have to put it in a storage unit that's going to replace trees that are actually storing carbon. You know, like, we have to look at that face on first. You know what I'm saying? We can't just, I was thinking, now in that case, what could I do? Would I go out and stand by that sign, you know, or what? I don't know, but you have to look at it first, and it's not fun. And then, you know, here's another dementia. So Diane, I'm not answering your question yet because I think we have to look at what's going on first. So then there's the possibility that our president and his allies are sort of mad themselves. I hope you don't mind my saying that. At the very least, they represent the pinnacle of narcissism. And I think that's the cultural dementia that we're dealing with. It's like I, me, mine, I need, I want, I must have, I know. And this is the absolutely, oh, there you are. You came on. This is the opposite of the cultural mindset that inhabited this continent before our European ancestors appeared on the scene. So it's like, if you watch what's going on, we're having a lot of feedback on.
Yep.
Let's keep going.
Okay. It's like, it's like the end game of that colonial takeover that began in the 1600s when our European ancestors came. It's like all the dark interests that are propping up this administration are gutting hundreds and hundreds of regulations and protections for not only land and wildlife, but air and water quality and the poor and vulnerable of all species. So first of all, when Joe Biden and his team take over, they will have so much to undo before we can even begin the major transformation of this cultural, illness that we've got. So, all right, now get me back on track, Diane. I got off on a wild hair there.
You're perfectly on track. I think that's a great précis of it. Oops, I think we need to mute something. Oops. Oh dear.
That sounds better.
Yeah. Good.
It's good. Go ahead, Diane.
Oh God.
You're doing great.
Diane, can you hear us?
I don't know if y'all can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. And I don't hear the feedback.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Oh dear me.
I wonder if she can. Diane, can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay.
So now we have video and not audio.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
She can't see us.
Hello? Duck.
All right. Well, Susan, what we may need to do is go ahead and continue with, we do have some audience questions.
Okay. All right, let's try it. Let's try that.
Okay. Why don't we do that? Elise would like to know.
Well, apparently you can see and hear me, but I am having trouble, in fact,
how frustrating.
seeing and hearing you.
Sorry, Diane.
Hearing you.
Let me go ahead and
Yeah. She is.
mute her. Whitney, our expert tech person on the back end, I think is going to try and communicate with Diane.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. All right. Sorry for that small interruption. Elise would like to know, she says, Sue, I know you spent a great deal of time sitting with your dad, and I wonder how much actual writing you did during that time with him, jotting down short notes, snippets of things he said or ways you were feeling to use later. Or is this book constructed later in retrospect, looking back?
Well, she got it right. Lots of my notes were on the back of envelopes in his room from a bill or something, because he was really quite verbal most of the time. And so I just never knew when he would say something that I'd really want to, and I didn't really think I was going to write a book about it. It was just sort of a way to connect back to my sister and my uncle in particular, who I talk to most days, and say, here's what happened today, and here's what's on his mind and what we did. But I didn't have my journal in there taking notes like I would if I was with the birds, because usually there was quite a bit to do. Well, you know how it is. There is and then there isn't. So it's a combination of boring and got to, lots to take care of. So it was a jotting sort of a thing, or I would sometimes like dictate notes into my phone of things that happened. And then plus the other caregivers that I ended up hiring, they kept really great notes and logs. So there was this wonderful core of women who were working with me to help Dad, and they would report stuff. And, 99% of it would be routine, and then there'd be something really cool that I would want to always remember.
Sure, sure. Another question about your process. Let's see if I can find it. Andrew says, I'm wondering as a writer how you balance within your chapters this sort of science journalism with the more personal memoiristic elements. It's something I first noticed you do very well in Tracking Desire. Does it come naturally, or is it sketched out or outlined in advance?
I was trained in science, and I had to develop the personal writing voice. So it always is a big balance, but it's something I really try to make happen, because I think sometimes there's more credibility with science, and sometimes there's more credibility if it's your actual grounded in the body experience. So that was part of the, wrapping around the core of the title that I had to do. And it took years really to figure out, how do these stories fit together? But what I think is that for all of our stories, we're living something that's true, and it's of this time on the planet. And so unless you're trying to delude people, your stories coming from both of those angles and others are going to ring true. Mm. So I started out working for the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and I had a lot of freedom there to write species accounts and guides to where to go see wildlife and planting for wildlife, and that was really fun. But I guess as I got older, I was more interested in incorporating my responses that I thought would resonate with other people too, to what I was seeing with the kites, or with the coast, or with the plovers, or with my dad. So
Thanks.
I hope that answers.
Yeah. Liz says, I love your memoir. And she says, I'm writing a memoir, but at this point, it hasn't included the loss of my mother to Alzheimer's. Was the process more painful or cathartic?
You mean because I wrote about my dad?
Yeah, I think she means, was the process of writing about your dad more painful or cathartic?
I think two things. One, because it was a long slide for him. It was about, a 10-year process, which is reasonably typical. And I was around for the last 5 of those as often as I wanted to be, every day or so. I was able to grieve his loss bit by bit by bit. So writing about it wasn't painful at all. And my son David said to me, when I would report, he'd say, how are you coming on the writing? And it would be like, well, I'm still doing it. And he'd say, I think you're using this as a way to stay connected to Grandpa. And I think that that's been really true. I had a great dad, and he really loved us. And so I hope that he feels honored that I spent this much time with him after he was dead, because that was the spirit in which I intended it. Yeah. So, but also I think if you have something painful, that's, a lot of what this genre is all about. For me, the pain that's harder to deal with is the losses of the, watching the birds decline, watching the wildlife refuge, impacted by sea level rise and hurricanes, and watching the weather change. That's the bigger tragedy. And he was at his time, but I don't think that it has to be the Earth's time.
Sure. Um, let's see. Mary says, Susan, thank you again for writing a book that so interweaves your love for your father and your love for the world. Especially in these COVID days, I think about the deep awareness you show in the book of the plight of the underpaid women workers on whom facilities like your father's depend, particularly women of color. How can you imagine all of us being allies for them, especially those of us who are seeking facilities for elders we love?
That was a really big issue for us, and it's tricky because if you have someone in a facility, uh, you have to check out whether it's possible to pay them more. Then it's a difficult situation because the women who work, and it's mostly women, in the facility are only being paid minimum wage for the most part. At least that was true at that time. We hired women to help us that we trusted and loved like family, and we paid them 3 times minimum wage or twice. And I think that's tricky. It's tricky. But another thing that we also tried to do was to talk to other. You get to be friends with all the relatives of the clients in the nursing home because you're all there a lot. And we talked together about and to the management of the facility to say, this isn't, this is not adequate pay for the work they're doing. So the trouble is, we roll over. After my dad died, I didn't really ever want to go back there because I had already spent a lot of time there. But I and my siblings and my husband, we always had a practice of paying people much more than minimum wage, because that would not have been right. To sit there and to do what I didn't want to do full time, that just, there's just something not right about that, ethically not right.
Kathleen says, when you began writing about taking care of your father, did you see the analogy between caring for him and caring for the planet, or did that insight grow out of your writing?
It grew out of the writing, and it grew out of the just sitting there, and trying to figure out what can I, because not a lot happens in one in one bedroom with somebody that can't move around very much. So that's what drew me out to look at what was happening in the forest outside, the kudzu taking over, and it wasn't immediately my plan at all. But I had been, because I'm a writer, I'd been taking notes. Like when I would go visit him in New Jersey before he came down here, I would write in my journal at night or on the way home. And, I was just always, we always as writers look for how do our stories come together and make sense? What can we do with it? Especially when there's already so many memoirs out there in the world.
Sure. Gary says, was it your dad who instilled in you the love for the world around you that you have demonstrated for so long?
I would have to credit him with starting me down that road. Both of my parents always took us, all our vacations were outside, camping or, we did some hiking. But really, as a family, we did not know much about what we were looking at. In Coming to Pass, in the last book I wrote, I had a chance to sort of meditate on how we would drive across the Barnegat Bridge to the barrier islands off of the coast of New Jersey, and not even thinking, oh, this is an island, this is a sound. We're just going where we want to go, which is kind of the cultural problem. We're just heading to where we want to go, which is the edge, which is the beautiful ocean. So I had to put that together over the later years. And something that's been really fun is that my husband, Jeff, is a marine scientist. And we we're out there all the time, and we're just looking at how things change, and mostly just really enjoying being here. Being that's been a, even though we can't go see our family, and that's really sad because of COVID, we're spending a tremendous amount of time on the water, in the water, around the water. And always, it's like if you put your body, wherever you put yourself is where you're going to get your inspiration. And so for me, it's the Sochapee River or the Ochlockonee River or the Osceola River or the Gulf of Mexico. And so I think that informs my writing in a big way.
Sure, sure. One more question from Rebecca. She notices your necklace, and she asks, is there any significance to it? Can you tell us about your necklace?
Yes. Rebecca, this is it's a pewter rendering of the goddess Artemis, and it was given to me by our longtime beloved teacher, Loretta Armour, and Artemis is the goddess of wildlife. And she gave this to me, I would say in the 1990s, to encourage me to move forward with this work that I do. So that's why I chose it for tonight. Very significant to me.
Oh, all right. Well, I know that I said that was one more question, but I have one more question. This is from Hannah. She says, your metaphor of the single bird is so powerful and potent, and I'd love any advice you can offer for how an individual can home in on a particular issue or front that we can fight for in the face of such an enormous climate crisis.
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that it's a matter of what you feel drawn to the most, what you feel the most passion for, the most concerned for, and the most love for. Like I think that advocacy gets really difficult when it's all urgent and hard and despairing. But if, like Diane mentioned in the beginning, we love Florida so much that we're willing to speak at least for on behalf of the Panthers, not just against the toll roads, on behalf of Black lives, not just against structural racism. I think that fuels the process of finding where our work is. And I mean, I struggle with that all the time, but I think that for me, I can look at things, I can sit with things deeply and look for how they're connected. And I hope that that's a gift that I can offer. But I have asked that very question that Hannah raises every day all my life, like, use me. Tell me what's the best use of me in these times. And that's what we really all need to be doing.
Sure.
And let me hop back in now that,
Yeah.
There she is.
Welcome back.
I did not die. Somehow Zoom kicked me out of the meeting, probably
That's
on
okay.
taste grounds.
We're
And
glad
then
you came back.
Wouldn't let me back in. But what I wanted to mention, what I think is so valuable about Susan's work and the work of Janice Ray and of all these other, and there are so many writers right around here. Julie Hauserman, Craig Pittman, read them in the Florida Phoenix. These people tell the stories of a place. They tell the stories of a shoreline. They tell the stories of a stand of trees, of a spring, of part of the Everglades, whatever it is. Once you know the story of a place or of a species or of one individual animal, it doesn't matter, whatever it is much harder to destroy something if you know
That's
it's
so true. That is.
And so Susan is engaged in the work of telling stories that are stories that will save us, you know, stories that will, I mean, I found this book so moving because my mother is still in pretty good shape, but she requires care. And, you know, anybody who has an older parent, you want to read this, and you want to read this about how your older parent is as much, and you and everything is as much a part of nature as the trees and the birds, and the things that swim in the sea, all of it, and to feel a sense of kinship with it all, and to learn its story, and to learn the story of Susan's father, who was involved in all those industries that we, of course, think are terrible and awful, but that come from a particular place and time, and that made sense at that time. And that what we're doing is building story on story, so that we begin to modify what we understand and say, oh, perhaps this is a way to go now.
That is excellent.
I think wasn't there somebody else with some questions? I didn't mean to hog time there.
she's answered quite a few in your absence. We're glad you're able to join us again. Well, now that it's about, let's see, 6:47, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But like I said, do pick up this book from Midtown Reader. It is a magnificent book, a beautifully written book, as you heard. Thank you so much to you, Susan, for joining us tonight and for writing this book. Thank you, Diane, for being here as well.
Sort of.
All right.
Thank you so much, Midtown Reader. You guys are just, we have to shout out for our independent booksellers. They mean everything between the writers and the community. If we don't have you, then we've got Amazon, and that's not where we want to be.
He doesn't need any more money. He really doesn't. And thank you to all of you who signed up. This is a great, great turnout. And it just goes to show the feeling in this community. I think a lot of it big Susan Cerulean fans, which is understandable, but also people that give a damn about the ground on which they stand and the preservation of the things that make them love this place or any other place that's deep in their hearts. So thank you all for coming and virtually coming visual. I don't even know. Yep. As you can see, I hate machines. So
they know it too. I think that
they do know.
We should also say, end on the note of story, that if you are from here and you have not read Between Two Rivers, then that is the best compendium of stories, which includes Diane Roberts and all the writers that she mentioned, plus many more that we know and love dearly.
Many, many more. It's a
and
wonderful.
Midtown Reader carries that book. So
yeah.
Let's keep the stories going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. Robin asks, will the recording be available for us? And the answer to that is yes. We are recording this and we will post it on the Midtown Reader YouTube channel, so you can look for it there. That's a great question. Mary Ann wants to know how many people are here, and we had about 120 sign on, which is a fantastic turnout. So thank you again, Susan. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everyone,
so welcome.
for being
Thank
here.
You
all right.
What
Have
a
a great
pleasure.
evening, everyone. Good night.
Okay.
Good night. Take care.